You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in beautiful, and I do mean beautiful, it's gorgeous outside Northport, Florida. I've got three really cool guests in the house today, or three count me. But I've got Robin San Vicente and a really special guest, first time ever on the show, Miss Alaina Ray with Development Service, and she's the Development Services Director. So Alaina, how are you today?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me on.
And Robin, how are you?
Fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. So the first question out of the gate is, we've got some new things happening with the department that you oversee. So first, I want you to introduce yourself, tell your background, and then go into what you govern and then that new position, and give us an overview of what that's all about.
Sure. As I said, thank you for having me on today. It's really an honor. I've been with the city for almost 2 years. It will be 2 years in December. And I'm the Development Services Director, as you said. I've been in Southwest Florida for a long time. I started my planning career here as an environmental planner for Loudoun County many years ago. I won't name a date so that we don't age ourselves, but had a lot of opportunity to work in leadership positions around Florida and Texas, Virginia, and decided to come back to Southwest Florida where my heart is. And so I am over the Planning and Zoning Division, building, permitting, inspections, code enforcement, and now soon to be our new Natural Resources Division. Which is really exciting. We're very happy to finally have this division that we can put in place and start concentrating on our environment as we're growing.
So what's the importance of the new division? What is that truly all about?
Well, if you look at the city's comprehensive plan and strategic plan, we have a lot of policies about environmental conservation, protection of the environment, sustainability, resiliency, all of those things. Lots of really good policy direction. It's never been implemented. Most of it's just sat there in a book on a shelf and has never had anyone to carry those things through. So the importance of this is that we finally do what Northport really, we wish could have done years ago before the development really started taking off here. This is our opportunity now to try to catch up, try to get ahead. And it's so important right now in our history because we are growing at an unprecedented rate for Northport. And if we don't start putting these policies into practice now, it will be too late.
Robin, do you have a follow-up question for her on this?
No, I think I'll wait for her to continue to explain the department's functions. Is there any specific targets or immediate concerns and so forth? There's a lot of questions, but I'll let her lead. And if you'll allow me to maybe jump in if I have a question.
Sure, that'd be fantastic.
Okay.
So we'll run with exactly what she just kind of pointed out. What are some specifics that you feel that we should really kind of focus on right away?
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, I've got to get the staff in place. So I've got the city commission gave us 4 new positions to start this division, and we've already got arborists that will be part of this division as well. But we're bringing in a natural resources manager, an urban forester, an environmental specialist, and an environmental planner. These are people who will really have the expertise to dig in and to start implementing those policies we just talked about. And good news, we have some of those people who have accepted positions, and we're in the process of getting start dates for them. So we're very close. Some of the things that are the most probably time sensitive and critical, the city has been wanting to do a tree canopy study and tree plan for a long time. And Public Works has worked on that, but they're not tree experts and they're not environmental experts, because probably one of the first things Robin will tell you about our environment, it's not just about the trees. It's about all of the understory and the ecosystem that goes along with them. Because when we have a developer who takes out trees, they're not just taking out trees, they're taking out everything underneath those trees.
Sure.
And so we really need to get an understanding of what we have here now. Where are the hot spots? For instance, we have heat islands in the city. Where are those? Where can we target planting additional trees and restoring some of that, not only just canopy, but understory, to help our wildlife and our temperatures and our flooding and everything else? That's probably one of the things that's been the most prominent in the commission's mind, is to get that study done. So we're bringing someone in, the person who has accepted our urban forester position. I am not making it official as to announcing who it is yet, but the person who's accepted has actually implemented those things. He's done those studies, implemented those programs, and has done some great work in his career. So I'm excited about that. That's going to be right out of the gate. We're going to be doing that study. Another thing that we really want to do is go through all of our master planned communities and our commercial developments who have mitigation plans that they were supposed to take care of conservation areas over the years. One of them that we've worked on closely with Robin is Heron Creek. They had a mitigation plan that they were supposed to take care of conservation area for 20 years. It hasn't been done. and mainly because the city just didn't have anyone to concentrate on that. So that's another thing that we're going to be doing right out of the gate, is taking a look at all of those developments over the years that have those mitigation plans, or were supposed to have mitigation plans in place. If they haven't been doing them, we want them to start. And so that's a process. And Robin is familiar with how we have to go through and get those things updated, and inspections of those properties, and environmental assessments. So we're going to have people who are qualified to do that, and can work with those property owners to make sure that we get those processes in place.
So did you see the question right there on the screen?
Absolutely.
From Kathleen.
Yes.
So are you going to work with the Environmental Advisory Board? Is that going to make a better connection though for the city?
I really think it will. Our natural resources manager and our environmental planner that we're hiring will be the liaisons for the EAB. And the EAB has had a lot of great suggestions, recommendations over the years. They've done a lot of really good work. It's another thing that really not much has been implemented, simply because the city didn't have the resources devoted to an environmental program. So that connection, I think, is going to grow so much stronger. And we will be bringing those things from the EAB to the city commission and acting as that conduit for them, so that we can get more things off the ground. And two, the EAB will be benefited by understanding the totality of the programs that the city is working on, that we want to move towards, that we have the resources for, rather than them just being in a vacuum and not really knowing what the city is doing. We want the left hand to work with the right hand. And that's one of the things this division will be doing, is all of those environmental efforts that previously have been sprinkled around the city in different departments. This is going to centralize them. So, for instance, Public Works has had a program for wildlife sighting. We're going to bring that into this division, because this is the division where the expertise will live. And Public Works is very thankful of that, because they're not tortoise experts. They're not scrub jay experts. So different things that utilities and Public Works and some others have been trying to get off the ground for years, we're going to centralize them and make sure that we're actually doing things in a coordinated way. And we can track those things then.
So
see our progress.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Just on following your immediate concerns. One of the immediate concerns that faced with looking at is the Warm Mineral Springs Geotech Survey and the roadway that has to be cleared in order for them to be able to perform their surveys. In the documents, contract basically says that environmental specialists should be overseeing it, because I know how other builders come in and they do roadways in order, and they don't give a crap as far as what they go over or how wide or whatever. So that was just our concern: is anybody going to be overlooking that process?
So for the Warm Mineral Springs part, the geotech work that's being done, the Parks Department is handling that, but and our project managers with Public Works, but
they're not an environmental specialist.
They're not, and so that's why we're contracting those services right now. So we do have environmental consultants who are working on this with the geotech company to make sure that that is monitored and that they only disturb the bare minimum that's needed in order to get in there and do that work.
And we're just assuming that they're going to walk it prior to clearing to make sure there's no burrows, there's no other species.
Right. Our project manager for the project she's in a different department, but she's got a very detailed plan for all of that to make sure that all of that is done. Yes.
Okay.
Is that, and I'm just going to follow up in a kind of a umbrella type of thing, because we don't have a division yet, and that's not going to monitor that. When we do work like this, I understand the one side where commercial is just going and clearing and doing their thing. This is more of a specific project with Warm Mineral Springs. So I don't want to say standards, because the standards are the standards, but is the focus of Warm Mineral Springs at a higher level? And I caution myself in even asking higher level, but are you handling things with kid gloves more with the Warm Mineral Springs project because of the environmental side, and it's also a park?
I would, and just my personal opinion and the way I kind of approach these things, because I do have an environmental background. My education's environmental. I was an environmental planner. I was a project manager for Everglades restoration. So I have a strong love of that. I would hope that any city project that was taking place in or near a very environmentally sensitive area would employ the same level of attention and expertise and services that we're using for Warm Mineral Springs. Just because Warm Mineral Springs is high profile and it's a sensitive area, not just for the environment, but for the community, I would hope that any area that has environmental concerns or issues or sensitivities, I would hope that we would use that same approach. And one of the things that we're wanting this division to do is work with other departments as we do have city projects to make sure that we are addressing those needs. Myself and my assistant director for development services, we have now started meeting with the Parks Department to work with them on parks master planning. And we're going to start, as we bring this new division on, we're going to be looking at ways that we can work with the Parks Department to enhance our environmental profile in parks, whether it's through conservation of certain areas or restoration of certain areas, and also the educational opportunities that we can provide in our parks and in our city properties to help people understand the environment that we live in.
Fantastic. So I paid attention to some of the wording that you just used. So I kind of want to go over the difference between the personal aspect and the leadership in City Hall stance that you have, because there are two different sides to you. There is the personal side of you and there is the business side of you. So can you kind of explain that relationship that you have to balance?
Absolutely. As a public government employee, a public servant, you don't always get what you want. There are things that you have to do that you don't always agree with. As a person who's been in local government leadership for a long time, I've learned that my job is to carry out the policy that's set by our elected officials. Sometimes I agree with that and sometimes I don't. And I can tell you that I've worked in places where I absolutely did not agree with most of what was going on. But I have an obligation and a duty to carry those things out. However, I also, from a professional standpoint, as a certified planner, I have a duty to provide a professional level of expertise and recommendations to those elected officials so that they can make the best decisions possible. Those decisions sometimes are swayed more by public opinion than they are planning best practices or environmental best practices, and I understand that. I've always said that I never take those decisions personally because if you do, you really can't be in this job. You
Right.
can't. Things just aren't always going to go the way you would personally vote or the way you personally see things. And you have to learn to sort of put your personal side to the side sometimes and do what you're directed to do. However, I have been an advocate for the environmental issues. I will always be an advocate for them. I care about them deeply on a personal level. And so, of course, that's going to come through in my job and in my desire to make sure that we're being the best that we can be as we move forward. But sometimes it's hard. You do have to balance sometimes your personal side against what your obligations are as a public servant. And I will tell you that I take my duties as a public servant at the very highest level. I've always said that if I had to fall on my sword over anything, it would be over morals and ethics. And sometimes as a public servant, you have to take that stance. And fortunately, I've worked most of the places I've worked in. That hasn't been. I haven't had to do that.
Right.
But this is a city that I think we all care deeply about, and we live here. We own our homes here. Our families are here, and I think that as a public servant, I feel really privileged to be in this place at this time and being able to carry out some of the things that we're able to do with this, in particular with this natural resources division. I think it's just a really great time.
Question, John? Okay, I'm getting questions and I have kind of a question. I'm not sure if I'm going to word it correctly, so forgive me. But it based around your director currently of neighborhood development services, coordinating with planning and zoning, coordinating with code enforcement and all that. And now we've got the natural resource division. Is there any kind of conflict there between the two departments with you really speaking for conservation and proper development integration versus the neighborhood development side of it? Do you know what I'm trying to get at?
Absolutely. And that's something that because of the roles that I've had over the course of my career, I think I've been in the middle of that almost every day of my career. So we did officially change our name to Development Services. So we dropped the neighborhood so that it's clear that Northport, we have a lot of neighborhoods, but we're more than neighborhoods now. We are a whole lot of different things now. There has to be a balance. The city's going to grow. There's going to be development. How do we do it in a responsible way to ensure that while there is development, we're also protecting some of our most critical resources? I feel sometimes like I'm standing in the middle.
Well, you are in the middle.
I've got the bulldozers on this side and the tortoises on this side, And that's a position I've been in my whole career. When I started my career as an environmental planner in Lee County, I was reviewing development plans and approving development plans, while at the same time I'd go out, the next day after I'd be signing off on a development plan, I'd be out in the field telling some guys to get down off their bulldozers because they were in an area they shouldn't be in and they needed to get out. My whole career has been that way. And I feel like it allows me to ensure that we consider the environment from the very beginning of the development process. And that's something that has not occurred in Northport before. As a planner, as a certified planner for land use, and an environmental advocate and with my environmental training, I understand the importance of looking at environmental assets before anything ever gets off the ground. When those plans are first submitted, or when someone first sits down and talks to us about a development that they want to do in Northport, first thing we should be asking is, what do you have on the property now? What kind of trees do we have? What kind of habitat do we have? Do we have gopher tortoises? Do we have scrub jays? Do we have an eagle's nest somewhere? And if the answer is yes, if we've got some good, upland areas that are habitat, or we have wetlands, instead of going in and just designing the site as though it's a blank slate, we should be designing the site based on what's there and what can we protect. Buildings can be moved, parking lots can be redesigned, stormwater can be designed in a certain way to enhance wetlands rather than degrading and destroying them. So I think it's important that, and in my role, I feel like it's almost an advantage that I have both the planning side and the environmental side, because I can stand in the middle and say, we need to start it with the environment and go from there and design the site accordingly. And that's what we're starting to do with the new Unified Land Development Code. We're writing those requirements into the code. It's not going to be a suggestion or a recommendation. It's going to be a requirement that we look at it from the very beginning.
I loved your answer, because you actually, my mind, and I knew where Robin was coming from, and I was trying to look at it from that point of view. In my mind, I was thinking there was a distinct advantage between being the head of that department, because you have two other people within that mix. You've got leadership on both sides. You're the centerpiece. Now, the funny thing about being that centerpiece too is you're not the end all be all to the decision of whatever happens.
Right.
And I think people, I've read some things online, and I am really trying to emphasize people's wording of things in the real world on Facebook, which is not where you should just spew a whole bunch of stuff. But factually, your decision power, and you're collecting data, but you're directed by the commissioners ultimately, and they're ultimately held accountable for the decisions that are made. You're suggesting, but you're not the end all be all. And I think that's where the conflict comes in on the personal side and your business side too, right?
It can, because I'm also a resident. I'm a homeowner in Northport. And I have all of those feelings that every other resident and taxpayer has in Northport. I get out and I drive in the traffic every morning on the way to work, and I do all of those things that other residents do. But you're right. I can't make that final decision, and I don't make that final decision. I can provide a professional expertise recommendation, and I can also shape what a development looks like before it ever gets to the commission. And I can tell you that's absolutely something that's extremely important to us. Sometimes we'll get a development in, and you would hate to see it when it first came in. If you hate it at the end result, you probably really would have hated it at the beginning. Right. We affect a lot of change to development plans before they ever see the light of day at the city commission for a vote. I think that with the new zoning code, we will have a lot more ability to affect those plans for the better and for the environment. But ultimately, it is a city commission decision. But if the city commission has laid the groundwork, and we've carried out that groundwork well by having codes that do speak to the environmental importance of our resources, and we do carry those things out, by the time it gets to the commission, most of the time they should be able to say, this is exactly what we wanted to see and is a reflection of the codes that we adopted. If it's not, then we need to go back and reevaluate and see what we need to change in our codes.
Right. And I'm going to go to a question from Chuck English here in a second, but is that where the excitement for you comes in, though? Is that you now have another side that will have really good input that we've been lacking. So this is going to kind of balance that scale for you.
Absolutely. I think I mentioned to you right before we came on the air that I'm so excited about this natural resources division that I've carved out a spot for them right outside my office. So I want to really be very involved in everything that they do as they form and as we build them as a group. But I want them to understand the connection that they have to our planning division, and to seeing that development plan proposals when they first come in the door. I want them to be involved in that conversation. And that is exciting for me to be able to have that expertise in-house and embedded in the process, so that it's not an afterthought. It's not something that, isn't even discussed or mentioned until trees start coming down. That is not where I want us to be.
See, one of the points that I found out by listening intently to Public Works, and the gentleman is Frank Lama. I love him to death. But you talk about somebody who, and directly connected to the environment, is recycling. Mm-hmm. And we take that with great pride. And I get goosebumps every time I talk about Frank and our recycling program, because I literally travel and I brag about it everywhere I go, because people are struggling with it. And we have it down to just a mad science way of getting it done. And we actually make it profitable to have recycling. And we brag about that too. But that component, the expertise that he brings, I can't imagine not having him in that role. I want to think that that's what's going to happen with the environmental side too.
Yes. We want to be a role model for every other city out there. We want to be the place that other cities come to get advice and to find out how we've done these programs. That's who we want to be. And I think we're in a great place not only in our history, but with the resources that have been devoted to this now. I think we can be that example. And I've already had people from other cities calling us asking, how did you get this division approved? And I think it's because the city was ready for it. The city had been wanting it for a long time, but finally had identified what was lacking. And I think that in order for that to happen, the strategic plan that the city commission developed really put a focus on that. For the first time, I think the city commission was able to look at, on black and white paper, say, you know what, only 0.02% of our budget is focused on the environment. It was a pillar. It's one of the pillars of their strategic plan was environmental issues. Yet only $200,000 of the city's $53 million general fund budget was devoted to the environment. And that was kind of shocking.
That's not a big pillar.
No, it's not. It's a very small pillar. But that was kind of shocking. And when you look at all of the policies that we have that support environmental issues, and we were spending such a minimal amount to carry those forward. No wonder we didn't get much done.
Right.
So we want to be the example of how to do it right.
Awesome.
So may I ask questions?
1 second. Let me get to Chuck's real quick, and
Okay.
then I'll come right to you. But he said, "Welcome to the battle." But the question is, what's the difference between sustainability and resiliency as it relates to our natural environment?
You know, a lot of people use sustainability and resiliency interchangeably. But there are some differences. You know, resiliency is one of the things that we look at is how easy is it for us to bounce back when we have something happen. Ian was probably our prime example. And I think in a lot of ways, our environment is a lot more resilient than we are as people. You look at our habitats compared to the natural habitats around us, and some of our wildlife friends are doing a whole lot better than we are in recovering from Ian. But it's how do we bounce back from those types of events or smaller events, and how can we change our systems, our processes, our programs? How can we conserve things so that when we do have those events, we bounce back much faster, not only as people, but how do we help our environment bounce back a lot better? Sustainability is one of those things. How do we simply function with the continued growth that we have without overrunning our systems? So our stormwater systems, our water gates, control structures, our canals. How do we get those to a point where it's sustainable? Our development can sustain itself. So it's really two different things we're looking at. We need to be able to sustain the development that we're bringing, but we also need to be able to ensure that we are resilient enough to bounce back from those really hard-hitting events like Ian.
Nice. So I'm going to go ahead and Robin, you had a question. Go ahead.
Well, if we look at the conservation aspect of the department, I'm sure you are going to be putting together a priority list and so forth of what needs to be done.
Yes.
But with that said, the major area I think that we spoke about in the past was the Constitution Drive area that I don't think you had knowledge of until I sent you all the information on that. And the counties had cheated lots, and that whole area that was supposed to be put aside for the Florida scrub jay, Gulf tortoise. So that's a major concern that we're still waiting, almost like the Heron Creek situation. We're still waiting on that because that's very important, at least to get an update as far as what's going on with that. The other question was has the city had a chance to look into the relocation of the gopher tortoises within our state parks or local parks?
So those are two really good things that I'm glad that you and I had discussions on before, because the Constitution Drive issue is on my list, and I have a list. I have a list of things that I want this division to be looking into and moving forward with, and that scrub jay area is very high on that list. I've worked with scrub jays for a long time. Being in Lee County, we did a lot of work in northern Lee County back then. But the scrub jays they're such a valuable resource, and there's so few of them left that we want to do everything we can, not just to preserve their core habitat, but also to provide additional space for them to jump off and make those as they make their flights. So yes, that is very high on the priority list. The other one, remind me what we were just talking about.
The gopher tortoises. And
gopher tortoises, yes.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we want to look at doing is seeing if there is a possibility of using not just, I mean, there's places like Orange Hammock and places like
Right.
that, of course, but the city owns a lot of land too, and we have areas that would be appropriate for tortoise relocation, if we can provide the right habitat, if it's in the right area. We certainly don't want to relocate tortoises where they're going to be disturbed by the public, or where they're going to have the potential of getting out into streets and being in traffic. That's definitely not what we want. So we're going to be working with our Parks Department and Public Works, and we're already looking at all of the properties that the city owns to see maybe we would have some appropriate land that we could work with the state to become, certified to be able to have those tortoises there. It would mean probably some restoration and some ongoing maintenance to ensure that they are given the appropriate habitat. And that's a whole, field.
Yeah.
I've worked on a lot of gopher tortoise habitat in the past, and I love gopher tortoises. They're very near and dear to my heart. So if we're able to do that, we definitely are interested. It's a matter of, can we provide the right environment for them, and then can we get the appropriate licenses that would be needed from the state to do that. But yes, that is on my list too.
So another question here: how much is this going to translate to individual parcel development, and how much of the same will or should apply?
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of different types of parcels. We have single family, quarter acre lots, and then we have unplatted properties. It's a lot easier to do conservation on unplatted properties because we get to work with those developers from the very beginning to shape those developments. So we can require them to start conserving land and protecting certain areas on their property. Quarter acre single family lots are really hard to get conservation on unless we just buy the property, or one of our environmental partners purchases a property, because the single family lots in Northport, since most of them don't have water and sewer, they have to have a septic field, and most of them also have to be built up because of the flood elevations. So when you talk about a quarter acre lot, once you put a house, driveway, lanai, a septic field, and you build that property up to the height that it has to be to get out of the floodplain, there's not much land left. So we're in a difficult situation with single family lots.
I'm going to add a layer to you though, being the professional on the real estate side. When it comes to the environment, there are protections in place for the gopher tortoises and the scrub jays.
Yes.
That if you're a buyer beware.
Absolutely.
And truthfully, you need to deal with a professional when you're trying to buy land. Two reasons why. Scrub jays, you have to wait until they're clear. Mm-hmm. And then you can move, but there's a window, and you have to have that all set in play. The gopher tortoises have to go through the relocation, mm-hmm. and the property of relocation now. It was around $1,800 per turtle.
No, it's about 7,000 these days.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, since COVID, the tortoises have really made a major impact on relocation. Mm-hmm. So if you think our rent is high, their rent is higher. And that's how I look at it. They're renting their space in your property. You got to pay their rent too to move in. So if you have 3 gopher tortoises, can't say that word, you're really in harm's way. So that's why you have an expert. And it's ironic that we keep talking about that one word, expert. And I every time that the word expert is being used, you actually smile more, Alaina, because I think you're really happy with the fact that this level is being paid attention to now.
Absolutely. You know, for years, for instance, the city used public works tree crews to work on trees, and we still will, but they're not experts on trees, and they understand that, they know that. We have had zoning inspectors looking for gopher tortoises, and our zoning inspectors aren't trained for that. So I'm very excited that we are putting the resources towards this that are needed to get the people on board who know these things. They've been trained on this. They live, sleep, eat, and breathe gopher tortoises and scrub jays and our environment. And I think it's just very exciting to be at this stage of our progress in Northport. But we have
question when you're done.
Yeah, I was going to say we have every single scrub jay lot we have noted in our system so that we don't issue permits during nesting season. We'd like to have some type of program like that for gopher tortoises, where we can know where those gopher tortoises are ahead of time, and we don't feel like we're on the back foot with that. It is expensive to relocate gopher tortoises, and I think that it would, so many of our lot purchasers are from out of state. They buy sight unseen. They don't know that there's a gopher tortoise on the property, and they don't know what that means. For us to be able to have a proactive program of identifying where they are and having that information available so that people know they might not want to buy that lot, or maybe we should be looking at that lot for conservation, or another organization should be looking at that lot for conservation. Assembly of lots is something that we're trying very hard to push, because if you get a lot of single family lots together, you can replat them, you can put development on one side of it, preserve the other side. So it's things like that will help us as we go forward. But having the right people in the right places to be able to work on these things is what gets us there. That and just the political will and desire to see it happen.
Can I ask my question now?
Sure, go for it.
Thank you, sir. On the lots, the single lots, parcels, there's a bunch of them within our hot zone for the scrub jays, where I'm at, that the city owns. And there's a bunch of tax liens that are outstanding. Would the city, or can the city, put into action a procedure where they are kept? Either they're donated to a conservancy like the Conservancy of Northport and surrounding areas, the environmental, they're wonderful, and they've been buying up lots.
Yes.
And the tax liens too. Instead of trying to just sell them, if they're in a place that is suitable habitat for conservation of wildlife species and native flora and so forth, then it's on our best interest, I think, to either keep them, grow the parcels into maybe a suitable tract,
right,
rather than just try and get rid of them all the time. We need to hold on to them, especially the ones in my area that is the hotbed for the Florida scrub jay.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing, is evaluating that entire list of city-owned properties. And there's about 1,100 of them. There's a lot of properties that the city owns. So we're going to be going through that list to see which ones might be appropriate for conservation. And either the city hangs on to it for conservation, or they trade it off or donate it or something to one of those organizations. But it's important to not just preserve it, but does it need to be rehabilitated? I mean, is there restoration that needs to take place? Some of those scrub jay lots, and they've overgrown. They haven't been maintained in a way that is inviting to scrub jays. And so sometimes you need to go in there and thin them out and cut down the taller trees to reduce predators being in the area and that type of thing. So yes, we are definitely going through that list to see which of those properties might be appropriate for that.
So Jennifer has a question, and I literally was thinking about this because I was trying to figure out on an individual lot, and it seems to be the focus that to me, I don't think, from what I've heard from you, I don't think that that's what this department's focus truly is individual lots. Although I understand her question. But I also understand she was talking about putting 10 feet, the easement.
Yeah.
Now, to me, I already know the answer, and I'll try to throw it your direction with this, but that 10 feet of easement, if you left it environmentally friendly, they're going to tear it up when they go in there anyway. It's not going to exist. And 10 feet of environmentally friendly strip along private property seems to me to be, you're stripping the right away from the owner at that point too, of their 10, not their 10 feet, because it's utility,
Right.
but there's 10 feet there that even Jennifer or even when I owned the house, I didn't have that block in there to build or to build into my narrative. Can you talk about that relationship and
Sure.
let me clarify my mind and her mind at the same time, because I see the relationship between the two, but I also don't think that that's anywhere near the focus of what this department is.
Right. So, I mean, sure, we're looking at single family lots and how we can maintain some tree preservation or natural preservation on there. But those utility easements are a lot of times they're for drainage, or they're for cable services and those types of things. They're for our public works department to be able to get back to canals or to drainage ditches, to our ditches, so that they can clean them out and make sure that they're maintaining, the capacity they need to back there for flooding. But the other thing too, I talked a little bit earlier about how most of our lots here have to be built up in order to put a house on them. And it's not just a little bit. We have lots where they have to bring in enough fill to build up 4 to 6 feet. That's a lot of fill on a single family lot, a 10,000 square foot lot. And then you have to have that. You can't just have retaining walls next to the house next door, next to the property next door. You have to slope that fill at a certain rate so that it maintains a certain speed of drainage across the entire property. Once you bring all that fill in on a 10,000 square foot lot, most, if not all, of the existing trees on the perimeter of that property will likely die, either because they're damaged during development or because the fill is now on top of their root system. And if you put even 6 inches of fill dirt on top of a mature tree's root system, you're very likely to kill it. I used to be a certified arborist, so that's another thing I did in my former life. But that those trees are very susceptible to death when you have that much fill. You won't see it the first year. You may not even see it the second year. But within 5 years, you will see a serious decline or death in those trees. And then those trees are in danger of falling on somebody's property. So, it's those single family homes it's really difficult.
Well, and I follow that up. If you're going to require that kind of stuff, then you're also going to have to require the maintaining of that, which would then cost the city. And I would think, because now you're there's such a muddied water there on everything. And I 100% think the money and the wiseness would be spent on developing and really what the department is focused at doing, correct?
When you look at preserving things, you want to make sure that you're preserving things that can actually survive over the long term.
Right.
And it's difficult on single family residential lots to control and maintain that long-term health. You really can't control what somebody's going to plant around a tree or what they're going to do around a tree when it's in their backyard.
Right.
But if we're talking about larger developments, or we're talking about even residential developments that are replatted, somebody comes in and buys a bunch of single family lots and they replat them into more of a contained neighborhood, we have much more control over preservation at that point, and being able to go in and make sure that that area stays preserved and maintained and isn't allowed to degrade over time. We have as a city, we have a lot more control over that type of preservation and development than we do single family lots.
That is such a major concern and a hot topic for the citizens of this city that have been bombarded, and they feel bombarded by overdevelopment,
right,
and the loss of their natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
So when I mentioned as far as all of the lots that the city owns, we need stepping stones, as you know,
Yes.
for the habitat and species that are within the habitat to survive.
Mm-hmm.
So if we preserve those lots, especially in the scrub jay zone, then we have a better chance of the species survival.
Absolutely.
And if we continue to provide stepping stones within our community neighborhoods, and maybe encourage a landowner with a credit, if you leave this, that, or this much natural wildlife habitat, you'll get a credit, something, in order to just save the wildlife that we have here.
Absolutely.
Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. And, Robin, it's not just saving it or preserving it, but it's also making sure that it stays the type of habitat that's needed.
True.
We have so many lots that are overgrown with Brazilian pepper and,
right.
All kinds of, smilex and kudzu and everything else that those lots aren't providing a lot of habitat and that.
Then we just need to reach out and work with all of the nonprofits that we have Absolutely. Out there and make that connection and utilize that relationship that is so available.
It is. And that's something that I want this, and we've talked about this division doing, is really working to build those relationships. There are a lot of environmental groups out there, a lot of them.
Yeah.
They do a lot of good work, and we need to build and strengthen the relationships between those groups and the city, so that we're not working against each other. We all right. want the same right. thing, and we're doing it together. And things work much better, more efficiently when you do that and you combine efforts. So that is one of the goals of this division.
So we've got about 3 minutes left, and Chuck English, and I love his questions, but I'm kind of going to group a couple together because we did have this major flooding this last time. There are some lots that we've purchased, according to what Chuck is saying, on on near 75. So a lot of these things that are happening are, how is the relationship between public works, the flooding side of things, and the natural side of things? How is that going to be mitigated and controlled? Because we all have a concern about that.
We absolutely do. I have staff in my department whose homes were flooded in Ian, and they lost everything, and it's devastating. We're still feeling the impacts of that, and we will for a long time. So the city has worked for a long time to try to buy what they call those first tier lots along the Myakkahatchee and some other areas, some of the canals, to be able to absorb some of that flood water and to ensure that we don't have development on those lots that would be at risk. And there's also a second tier of lots that the city has been looking at, and the city's purchased some of those and is going to continue doing that. But this division is a way to sort of concentrate our efforts and work with each department. There are lots that we could buy for flooding purposes that could serve a dual purpose or a triple purpose for parks, for conservation, for flooding, or canal access. How can we work together, make the most of the city's resources, and get the most benefit out of those lots? So flooding is a concern that we all have. We don't ever want to see another Ian, but we have to go forward with efforts that we know will be able to help mitigate that in the future. We can't have a plan for an Ian. It's hard to plan and make sure that we won't ever have flooding like Ian happens again, but we will do everything we can with the resources that we have to try to make that better.
Well, this is John Rawlings with WKDW Radio 97.5 FM. You can watch us on Facebook and recoup all of the last few seconds of what we're going to say here. But I'm signing off the air, and I hope you have a blessed day. Join me on Monday. Guys, on Friday. My week has not flown that fast, I hope. But join us on Friday for another show. We'll talk to you soon. So we're going to stay live on Facebook just for a couple minutes because I know you've got things you've got to do. You know, the involvement that we have from citizens now is, do you feel like, and I can see by the energy you have for this, because I think you have passion for what you do, but I think now that you have this in your grasp, I think there's another layer to your passion and excitement to kind of pull these two things together. And I think that's the most important part of this, is actually not thinking they're as an adversarial type situation. This is truly where you pull these professionals together and you start building properly. Yes. Is that where you see this excitement level for you?
Absolutely. This isn't just about building programs. It's about building relationships between our departments, between our residents and the city, between our environmental advocacy groups. This is about building those things so that we can all be proud of what we have here in Northport. And I do have a lot of passion for this. I have a pragmatic, realistic side of me too. So, you know, I know that government moves at the pace of government. So I have to, sometimes I have to rein myself back in because I want it all done now. You know, right. I want to do it all right now. Right. And so I even have to, kind of curb my enthusiasm sometimes and make sure that we do dot our I's and cross our T's, because we have to do things in a very regimented way in government, whether it's buying things, whether it's getting a grant for something, whether it's, procurement processes, whatever it is, hiring processes. We have a very regimented way that we have to do things. And while I want to get it all started right now, right. I have to curb my enthusiasm and go through the process and make sure we get it done right. But it is an exciting time. And yeah, I couldn't be happier that I get to help be on the leading edge of this.
Awesome. Robin, I want to thank you for being part of the show. And
I'm so glad that you did this show and brought us together. Because the community has been dying to hear from you and what this department is all about, the functions of the department, the goals, the specific targets, and so forth. So I'm glad, and I'm looking forward to working with you and trying to unite the community as one under this department, for this department, so we can all benefit this community and the environment that we live in, because we're not against each other. No. We all want to see the environment succeed. We all want to see proper development integration without being bombarded. So it's just a matter of getting together and forming a relationship that is well overdue.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this talk, and I'm looking forward to all the work that we're going to do.
Well, I appreciate both of you taking the time out of your busy days to join us on Real Talk. And I am super excited because when we can draw people together, we can do everything and anything. And I see the city of Northport as just the shining star that I always thought it was and will be. And I liked what you said earlier. We are going to grow, but it's how we grow. Yeah. And how, and I also like something else you said, is that there are some things you're not going to get. And you sometimes, and I think Robin even agrees with this, sometimes getting something is better than a zero. And anytime that you can have a win because you did speak up and you did say something and you did see change, that's what's the most important part, because nothing ever changes unless people speak up and implement change.
Yeah.
So I
In a respectful manner.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah. I repeat that.
In a respectful manner.
Boom. That's what I like. I love you, Robin. I love you. And the fact that we've done a couple of these shows, the funny thing is it's always been respectful. And I think that more people need to learn that word. And I also think they need to learn that it's not the way things get voted on that is mistrust. I don't like the word mistrust. There are some things that leadership has to do for certain reasons. And sometimes you have to look at the totality of what's going on. And I think having a voice with both sides now, with Alaina leading all of it, that's what's going to kind of settle, I think, all of the teetering back and forth down.
It's an exciting time.
It is. It's great.
Way overdue.
I think
you're the right person to lead it.
Oh, thank you.
You are.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just feel very privileged to be here right now.
Just expect a lot of phone calls.
Listen, not her, the other guy, or female, one of the two. She doesn't have to take those phone calls once you hire somebody, right?
I am really good at delegating. I didn't used to be, but I have gotten better at delegating.
I love it. This is John Rawlings with Real Talk Radio saying thanks for joining in. Please share this video because getting this information out is essential, because truthfully, we cannot kind of tear down the misinformation unless we provide great information. And that's what you did, Alaina, today. Thank you so much for being part of the show. Robin, thanks again. You guys have a blessed day, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Robin.
Bye.